it shows how important it is to include both life and death in our equation. And even if death is unpredictable, and even if it's not 100% clear, what do we know? We have some evidence, but we don't know exactly what will be there. Still, nevertheless, the responsible thing is not to ignore death. So immortal saints are described already from the Bible, and we have the oldest is Enoch, who is 7th generation to Adam, of course not by chance 7th generation. And the quote in the Bible about him is very simple. It starts with, Enoch was walking with God. He lived 365 years, which was the style at the time. He brought forth Methuselah, which is the man who lived the most, and sons and daughter. And again, Enoch was walking with God, and Enoch is gone because God has taken him. And there are other books that speak, like the book of Enoch, and there are a few of them, that speak what happened after. God takes him, strips him from the human body, together with Archangel Uriel, strips him from the human body and gives him a body of light, and Enoch transforms into Archangel Metatron, who is the face of God. He's the minister of face. He is the appearance of God, or theophany, as it is called. And Enoch becomes somehow a way that the universal God will be able to communicate, will be able to speak with human beings. He's like the first portal. You see, if we were a world of cows or a world of hamsters, God would take one hamster and make that hamster the minister of the face for hamsters, so that God could be perceived as a hamster, so that he can speak the hamster language. So Enoch is there as the portal, as a gateway for people to relate, to connect to God through a human communication means. The face, what face does God have? Imagine the amount of races and aliens and I don't know what through the generation, conscious beings. Not necessarily all of them look human. So for us, it is coming through Enoch and through Metatron, and he's revealed in the later tradition with Rabbi Akiva, for example, a little bit after Christ, when they go through certain special initiations and astral projections, they go to the worlds of God, and there they see Metatron sitting, and behind Metatron is a curtain, and behind the curtain is God. He's also somehow the help desk or something, the receptionist of God, if you want. From Enoch, we move a few thousand years further, and we find the great prophet Elijah that we already spoke about in another event. Elijah, as you know, made a lot of miracles. He was a very terrible, very upright, very clean prophet in the good sense. Terrible, very fiery, very uncompromising, persecuted all his life. And he goes with his disciple Elisha. There's probably a way to say it in English that I'm not aware of. And he takes him and he says, "My dear disciple, I'm going to die. Come, let's walk over the Jordan." And he splits the water in two. Elijah, they pass the Jordan and they stand there together, and he says, "I'm leaving now, make a wish." And Elisha says, "I want to have double the power of spirit that you have, double the occult power, double the paranormal power, the power of prophecy." And Elijah said, "Look, I'm going to go to heaven now. If you can see me pass through heaven, you will receive double. And if you can't, you can't. You will receive nothing." And so Elisha opens his spiritual sight and becomes open to the experience. A chariot of fire with 2 horses of fire comes from heaven. Elijah goes on the chariot. They said the horses split so he can enter, and the chariot rises to heaven. Elisha runs after him and tears out his garment. He takes and the garment is torn. He takes a piece of, like you saw there with Milarepa, a physical piece of Elijah with him, and as he goes back to the Jordan, with that he commands in the Jordan open. Elijah stayed in the Jewish tradition. Every Passover we have an empty chair for Elijah because he is the immortal saint. He is the one that we wait for. He is referred to again and again. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, when he wrote the Zohar, the first, or let's say the fundamental book of Kabbalah, he said to have written it together with Elijah in a cave while hiding from the Romans. There are many, many appearances also with the Baal Shem Tov and other rabbis after seeing Elijah. In the Christian tradition, in the text, the Pistis Sophia, that describes what happened to Christ with his disciples after the resurrection, Christ explains to his disciples that he summoned the spirit of Elijah to be incarnated as John the Baptist. And in other texts, like the Gospel of Nicodemus, when Christ comes, everybody goes from hell to heaven. And then in heaven, they only see three beings: Enoch, Elijah, and that thief from the crucifixion. That's, yeah, you can read, it's very wonderful, the Gospel of Nicodemus, and it has many signs of authenticity. The text, it's quite easy to read. You can find it, also the audio book, free on YouTube, and the PDF free online. So these are Elijah and Enoch from the Jewish tradition. From the Buddhist tradition, Padmasambhava, that Blandine mentioned, is considered by some an immortal being, and he is seen, there's numerous visions of him also from the 20th century. You can see this documentary Yogis of Tibet, and one of the yogis describes as he was sitting in meditation with some of his disciples, his foot started entering the rock, which is classic in the Tibetan tradition. That's when miracles happen. They have the fingerprint of Milarepa, of Padmasambhava. There's still the handprint, how they would put it in rock, or even the dog of Drumpa Kunli, of the divine madman. You can see he did the imprint with the thing of his dog with the little fingernails there. And as his foot entered the rock, and all the disciples, they were shouting, "Master, Master, Rinpoche, your foot is entering the rock." Padmasambhava appeared with a rainbow body, and so forth. In the tradition of yoga, the master of Yogananda was Yukteswar, the master of Yukteswar was Lahiri Mahasaya, and the master of Lahiri Mahasaya, so the grandfather, is the great Mahavatar Babaji, who has been living, at least according to Yogananda and according to another lineage by Govindan, has been living for centuries. According to Govindan, 1,800 years already, from the 30th of November 203, he is still alive, and visions of him appear as described in the autobiography of a yogi. He appears on the 19th century, he appears on the 20th century, he always looks like a 16-year-old boy, very sharp. He practiced some methods for awakening Kundalini. It is described in some of the writings about him that already at the age of 4 he was saintly, and he was a great Pandit, a great scholar, and then at a very young age he went to a cave in the Himalaya and practiced for 18 months the awakening of Kundalini until his body stopped aging. It is said when he walks he leaves no footprints, and there is no shadow. His body casts no shadow. These things indicate that it's actually a pranic structure. He eats very, very little, very, very rarely, and only as a ceremonial thing. So it has many indicators that this is a pranic body, and he's somehow perceived by Kriya Yoga followers as a kind of protector of humanity. And finally, the most famous, most important and influential case of immortality is no other than Jesus Christ, who, according to the Christian tradition, resurrected in the third day after he was crucified. And there are many, many stories of his resurrection, by the way, also from the Gospel of Nicodemus, Also from the Gospel of Peter, if you want to extend a little bit from the regular Bible, from the traditional Bible, there's many more details about that resurrection. And since that resurrection, that some might be skeptical, what do we have? Some writings of paper from some 2,000 years ago, how does that prove anything? But then if you read the lives of 10,000 and more Christian saints, if you just read the life of a few of them, and you see the tremendous impact that one moment with Christ, one vision of Christ, how it can change the life of Paul around, so that Paul becomes a saint. From a sinner, he becomes a saint, having one tremendous vision, and then following this virtuous path, he continues to get vision, but up to a point that he himself can raise the dead. And if you want a more modern example, is that of Sundar Singh, who hated Christians, and he was forced to be in a Christian school. He burned the Bible. His mother died. He was depressed. He wanted to know God, and he said, I will either know God by the sunrise, or I will throw my head in front of the train and die. And as he was praying and hoped to see a vision of Krishna or of Shiva or anything of his tradition, a light appeared in the room, and it was the light of Christ. And Christ appeared to him and said angrily, "Why do you persecute me? I died on the cross for you." And that was enough for Sundar Singh. He was transformed completely and devoted his entire life for Jesus Christ. Also, his writings are extraordinary, and you can find them. Most of them by now are for free online, also as PDFs and also on YouTube. And you can see that the subtle presence of Christ, as I hope you can realize, is extremely alive and extremely available. And as Enoch and Metatron is one gateway between humanity and God, Christ is somehow the accomplished bridge between mankind and God, and his spirit somehow, or very much, lives on. All these understandings, or these realizations, now putting together all the evidence from all the different traditions, and we try to make it very essential. Of course, we can speak for a few weeks about all these evidence, taking them one by one, but essentially, all that, it shows how important it is to include both life and death in our equation. And even if death is unpredictable, and even if it's not 100% clear, what do we know? We have some evidence, but we don't know exactly what will be there. Still, nevertheless, the responsible thing is not to ignore death. And a great part of our disease as human beings, as humanity, and this terrible imbalance that we live in, both individually and as a whole in humanity, is because we do not include it. We do not embrace the fact of our death, the mystery of our death. And we tend to focus only on things that we can define, things that we can easily control, and that goes only in half of the picture, and that half is life. And the other half of the picture, which is undefined, which is very difficult to influence yet possible, which is not very fulfilling for the ego, that half of death we ignore. And because we ignore that, life doesn't work, and life becomes empty of meaning. But if we widen our horizon and we include these two as one, as Blandine mentioned, life has meaning, and life will go for virtue. It is inbuilt. The universe is not built to create selfish, miserable, depressed, selfish bastards. It's not built for that. Because it was built for us to have this embracing vision of life and death. There is a reason why death is there. And as we broaden our vision, we become very harmonious, virtuous human beings as individuals. And as we will do that on the level of humanity, and as it was done in many societies of the past, when this happens and people really embrace both life and death, they become virtuous, and the society becomes virtuous. And what they do has meaning, has harmony, has care, and has love. People that return from near-death experience, this is one of the most fundamental messages that they return from. And there is by now numerous cases, and when they return, they say only love matters. When you take life and death together, and that's the near-death experience, it forces you to look into the other side. You go life, death, back to life, and you come to the conclusion that includes the two, which is only love matters. So as we embrace death, that realization comes, and from that realization, all virtue and harmony, both of the individual and of the world.
We want to read you one poem of the great, wonderful poet Rumi. And if you want, you can close your eyes and just let the words sink in. And we see what they do with you. On the day I die. On the day I die, when I'm being carried towards the grave, don't weep. Don't say, he's gone, he's gone. Death has nothing to do with going away. The sun sets and the moon sets, but they are not gone. Death is a coming together. The tomb looks like a prison, but it's really release into union. The human seed goes down in the ground like a bucket into the well where Joseph is. It grows and comes up full of some unimagined beauty. Your mouth closes here and immediately opens with a shout of joy there. And with these poetic words, we end our part. Hey guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on spirituality, Tantra, and more.
And if you want to sign up for our online classes or for our retreats, you can see our website on the description below.